Welcome back to the Tavern, World Builders! Today we are talking about The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. Beware, here there be spoilers. Grab an ale, zero proof always available, and pull up a chair. I'm Emma, your friendly barkeep, along with Allison.
Hello!
And Christiana.
Hi!
And we are so happy to have you here. Cheers!
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 When the Earth is destroyed by Vogon demolition ships to make way for an interstellar bypass, there is only one survivor, Arthur Dent, an exceedingly normal man from England. He is saved by his strange friend, Ford Prefect, who, as it turns out, is not from Guildford, but rather from a small planet somewhere in the vicinity of Betelgeuse. Ford is, in fact, a field writer for The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, a travel advice and general knowledge compendium about the universe, who has been stranded on Earth for the last 15 years after being assigned to write a guide entry on the remote planet. The two manage to hitch a ride on one of the Vogon destroyers and escape the end of the world. Unfortunately, the Vogons are displeased to have hitchhikers aboard, and toss the pair into the cold vacuum of space. In an exceedingly improbable turn of events, they are rescued at the last second by the passing spaceship Heart of Gold, recently stolen by Zaphod Beeblebrox, President of the Universe, for reasons unknown even to himself. Aboard the craft are also Marvin, the depressed robot, and Trillian, formerly known as Trisha Macmillan, whom Arthur met, along with Zaphod, at a house party in London several months previously. Though, of course, at the time, he did not realize that they were not also regular Earth folk. The impetus for these highly unlikely coincidences is the ship itself, or rather its infinite improbability drive, which allows the craft to travel massive interstellar distances in the blink of an eye due to the principles of improbability. The Heart of Gold has a mission: travel to Magrathea, an ancient, widely believed mythical, planet that was home to the industry of custom luxury planet building. Zaphod isn't sure exactly why he needs to go there, as before becoming president, he locked off the sections of his brains that understood the plan, so that they would not be discovered and prevent him from becoming president, but he knows it's important. On the long-dead planet, they are greeted by Slarty Bart Fast, one of the original Magrathean designers. When the galactic economy crashed, they put themselves into stasis to reawaken thousands of years later when people could once again afford custom luxury planets. He reveals that the Earth was not a natural planet at all, but rather custom-made, and what's more, was the most powerful computer ever created, working on discovering life's ultimate question. Regrettably, it was demolished by the Vogons shortly before its calculations were to be completed. On Magrathea, they also encounter two white mice from Earth, who, as are all Earth mice, are actually hyper-intelligent pan-dimensional beings placed on the planet to preside over the computer's progress. With the Earth's destruction, they have one last chance to get the question. As Arthur is an Earthling who was there shortly before the planet's destruction, all they will have to do is remove his brain to get the precious info. Arthur declines to surrender his brain, and the Heart of Gold departs Magrathea at the end of the book, heading to get something to eat. After that explanation for anybody who has not read the book, hopefully that was enough to get you caught up to the conversation, let's dive into Happy Hour. So this was my pick for the podcast. This is one of my favorite books of all time. I love it so much, so I was very excited to talk about it, and I think the world building is great. It fits the story perfectly, in my opinion, and there's just so many things going on. But I'm curious to hear how you both felt about it. I believe you had both read it before, is that right?
Yeah.
Although a long time ago?
Yeah, it's been a while, but yes.
I'm going to come in with a ripping hot take and say that I don't think this is a particularly fantastic book. It's a really enjoyable book.
Boo.
I really like it. But after rereading it, I sat there and I thought about it and I was like, what actually happens in this book? And I'm like, nothing really. Nothing really happens. And the characters don't really make any decisions. Things just kind of happen to them, which is something I, try to avoid. So I was thinking of that. And I'm like, this is a weird book to suggest as examples because it breaks every single rule and it's still very successful and a fun read. I don't think you could tell most people, oh, if you want an example on world building, read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Because I'm like, no, because then what they're going to get from it is you should info dump nonstop with the sides that have nothing to do with the story. Which is generally bad advice. So I just thought it was interesting. So that's my hot take. It's a great book in the sense of reading it and enjoying it. But as an example of what to do and what not to do, hard to say that it's a good example,
I think Hitchhiker's Guide is a great example of an omniscient narrator.
Yes, yeah.
Because omniscient narration isn't very popular anymore. Probably a lot for the reasons you're saying, Christiana.
Yeah.
They say a lot of asides, or at least this one does, and it can be hard. Writing comedy is hard.
Writing comedy is very
you have
hard.
to be really funny to pull it off. I think Douglas Adams is. I think he pulls it off.
Like I said,
think it's great.
There are things within it that are good examples. It's just when I was sitting there thinking of it, like, okay, like doing the plot points in my head and everything like that. I was like, dude, this is a like very strangely structured book. It's very fun, but if it wasn't funny,
it is a bit weird.
No one would like it, I think.
Yeah, no, it has to be funny.
Yeah.
I was also thinking that as I was reading it. I was like, I'm enjoying this, but not a lot is happening as I'm reading it. Like, stuff does happen, but it's not like the characters are going on a quest to accomplish something. They are just bumbling along.
Even the person who's on the quest, which is Zaphod, doesn't know why he's on the quest, and is so just sort of doing it because someone told him to, even though that person was himself. So it's very strange. Yeah. I'm always surprised because this is the first in a series, and whenever I reread them, or actually I always re-listen to them because I listen to them on audiobook. There's a great recording read by the author that I love. I'm always surprised when it ends because this book always ends sooner than I expect because more happens, of course, in the rest of the series, and I kind of am like, oh, that's right. And then, of course, more happens later.
It does feel
and they're very short.
abrupt.
Like, these are novellas. Like, they're very tiny. Yeah.
I actually haven't read the rest. Are they? I assume they're good because you say you
they're
reread
great.
them. Yeah.
I love that. The second one might be my favorite, The Restaurant at the End of the Universe. Yeah.
Maybe I'll have
really
to
good.
check that out.
As strange it is to say, because it is such a ridiculous and absurd book, I feel like it's more sort of a philosophical sort of story than it is a plot story.
Yes.
Like, it's more about how the characters feel about things and their reactions to things and that sort of thing, rather than necessarily about the plot, I think, which is, again, very different from a lot of books.
The reason the humor works so well is also because it's often making a philosophical or social or political point. It's very much tied to commentary about how the world currently works and how people want money and capitalism and bureaucracy and stuff like that. And so I find it very funny.
Yeah. Well, let's talk more about that. Let's head on over to Tavern Talk. So there's quite a few world-building things to talk about, I think, in this story. One of them, of course, being at the very beginning of the story, the book starts with the world ending. An apocalypse is something that happens a lot in fiction, and we've talked about a few of them. But the apocalypse in this book is, of course, very different from a lot of other
if you were to ask me for examples of apocalyptic fiction, I would not recommend this one. I wouldn't have, this is not the first one that would come to mind. This is not really the main point of the story. It's just a random, almost mild thing that happens. The earth is just destroyed.
I feel like
oh no.
Apocalypses in fiction usually involve some sort of survivors and like a society rebuilding, and this is like, no, it's just one guy. Everyone else
too,
gone in an instant.
Trillian,
that's true.
Yeah. Trillian's technically, she's from Earth. She was just picked up by Zaphod a few months previously. Yeah, it is very funny to have the destruction of the Earth be such a mundane thing. Like, for the rest of the universe, it's just, this is our regularly scheduled construction. And of course, for everybody on Earth, it's the worst thing that's ever happened. But the rest of the universe just goes about its day afterwards, and nobody cares.
Yeah, I thought the parallel to bureaucracy was just beaten over our heads, but it was funny because of that.
Yeah.
So, in the beginning, Arthur's house is gonna get knocked down, and he only learned about it 2 days ago. And the people were like, well, it's been on display in so-and-so place for months now. Like, what do you mean you don't know and you're not prepared? And he's like, I found it in a drawer in a basement and whatever, in filth, and I only learned about it a couple days ago. And then the same thing happens when they come to destroy the Earth. They're like, what do you mean you don't know? You had months. This was all documented in
You could have registered
galaxy.
a complaint.
Yeah. It's not our fault that you can't go there. So that parallel, it's just so obvious and in your face and hitting you over the head with it, but it's funny because of that,
Yeah. Dramatic irony and tragic irony is a lot of the kind of humor in this book, which is very effective. And you can be more obvious with things with humor than you can if you're just saying them straight. Because usually the problem with info dumping or just telling instead of showing is that it's boring.
Yeah.
And then if you inject humor, it's no longer boring, so you can get away with it.
That is Douglas Adams' trick, I think. It's how he gets away with so many random asides and sections from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is also a textbook within the book. Yeah, he gets away with that because it's funny.
Yeah, I do love how a lot of the asides do end up relating back to the plot later. It seems like it's completely unrelated, and then it'll go back to the story, and then a couple paragraphs later, something will pop up where it's like, oh, that's actually related to that thing that we just learned about in the aside.
Yeah.
Which is sort of a clever way of looping
smart.
them in. But when you are reading them, you're just like, why is this here? This is suddenly like a completely different... Now you're talking about this drink that is made on this planet, and why is this here?
Pan-galactic
Pan-galactic gargle blaster.
That.
Which is just like having your brain hit with a gold bar covered in a wedge of lemon.
Yes, the descriptions of things are particularly lovely. The Douglas Adams' way with words is wonderful.
Yeah, it's interesting because as absurd and ridiculous as the plot is, the writing is almost very poetic a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Like at the beginning when they're describing the Vogon ships, there's a description that says, the ships hung in the air the way bricks don't.
Yes, I love that
And then when the Earth is destroyed, the likes of the last sentence are, there was a terrible ghastly silence, there was a terrible ghastly noise, there was a terrible ghastly silence. And it's like, that's such a poetic way of describing something being destroyed. So yeah, the marriage of those two things, of like the ridiculousness mixed with like really beautiful and poignant writing, or like evocative writing, is really hard to do. Like I don't know that there's many people who can do that, and Douglas Adams does it.
Yeah,
it's tough. I've seen writers try to pull off this type of voice, and you have to be all of those things. You have to be funny. You have to be often making political commentary. You have to write really well, like have a way with words and write nicely at a line level, almost poetically. And what was the fourth thing? It has to connect to the plot somehow, or it's better if it does. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I've seen a lot of people, not professional authors, this is me, if any people I've ever gone to university with are listening, I promise it's not about you specifically. I've been in a lot of creative writing courses where it's like you could tell someone is really inspired by Douglas Adams and trying really hard to emulate that voice, and you can't, you know what I mean? Like, it's a Douglas Adams thing. You could be funny and you could have asides and you could have the omniscient narrator, but you have to kind of take it with your own lens of humor. Otherwise, it's a little painful, you know?
Yeah, it's tough to mimic this. Like, it's not one that you can easily kind of adopt. It's I think you'd have to work really hard at making it your own voice in order to get it to work.
And your omniscient narrator has to be more interesting to hear from than your character. Like, I think if this was narrated by Arthur, it would be a bit boring, maybe?
Yes, because he's boring on purpose. Yeah.
It's also, I think, works because if it were to be through Arthur's perspective, he would have no idea what's going on at any given moment. Like, he can't say, oh, I'm on this ship and this is what's happening, because he has no idea. I mean, realistically, it would just be him screaming internally the entire time, like, what's going on?
I think it could work. Like, you certainly have the aspect of we readers can put ourselves in his shoes because we also don't know what's going on. But I think
it would just be a very
different
story.
Yeah, it would be different.
Yeah. It is interesting because even though the device is not set up that way, it kind of reminds me of like The Princess Bride, where the story that's being told is almost as though someone is telling you the story, right? Like, it's not like you're not just reading the novel, it's the novel's being read to you by somebody that you are then reading, which is a very interesting, and I think maybe used to be a little bit maybe more popular as a device, although I don't think it's ever been sort of the most popular thing. It's always been kind of a fringe way of setting up your book. But yeah, I agree that, like, Arthur is your typical sort of everyman, like you guys were saying. Like, he's the one that is new to this world, so it makes sense for things to be explained to him, which then let you explain things to the readers. But yeah, if you were looking at it from his perspective, it would be a lot of, what is this? What's happening? I don't know what that is. And it's like, that would probably get repetitive after a while, and there are ways that you could pull it off well. But I think having the omniscient narrator really helped keep it snappy. As well as, I think, made the universe feel bigger. Because that's also, I think, could be run into a problem, is if you're doing this thing on this giant scale, but you're confined to a very narrow perspective, you don't get that whole scale of world. Whereas I also think one of the reasons the asides work is because it does give you this sense that, oh yeah, the universe is a lot bigger than what we're seeing, because it's talking about this planet and that planet and what this species of aliens do and that sort of thing, which makes the whole galaxy feel huge.
Even with just the size that Ford mentions the Hitchhiker's Galaxy Guide is, I can't remember what his exact words are, but he's like, oh yeah, it wouldn't fit.
It has to be on a tablet.
Yeah. It would take up like a library worth of pages or more than that. I can't remember what he says.
Yeah, it's something like they would have to carry around an inconvenient number of buildings to house the book in.
Yeah.
If a hitchhiker wanted to carry it in paper form.
Which implies the universe is very, very large.
Yes, yeah. Another world-building thing that fits into that giant universe is the aliens. So we see a few different alien races in this, and they are a mix. So a lot of the time I feel like you either get sort of humanoid aliens or very sort of bizarre aliens, and you kind of get both. Most of them are relatively humanoid, but then you have like the Vogons that are a little bit more sort of not typical bipedal life forms.
Oh, I love the Vogons. I love their poetry. I think it's great. Oh, Fred, old grunt, pugly.
Yes, for anyone who hasn't read the books, the Vogons' poetry is the third worst in the universe, and reading it is torture for your brain, which is very funny.
I liked them. Just everything is absurd. Like Zaphod with his two heads, and Vogons with their poetry. The babble fish that gets stuck into...
I wish I had one of those.
Yeah, which is a translating
little
device.
Fish to go into your ear that
translates everything. Be mighty handy.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people poke fun a little bit at when aliens are just very, like, basically humanoids. But sometimes, I don't know, I feel like that works, because it's sometimes describing aliens as being very alien takes up a lot of space on the page, or is difficult, or is yet another thing to introduce your reader to. And, you know, I don't think you have to explain. They never explain either. They're never like, oh, why does Ford and Zaphod look vaguely human? It's just like, well, that's just, you know, you can make up your own reason. Like, you know, maybe that's just how life evolves on different planets. Maybe it's the most convenient form that life takes. And you don't necessarily have to explain that.
One of my pet peeves is when aliens are too human-like. And sci-fi authors who worked with me know this, because I will get on the board and be like, make them more alien! I do think it works here because this isn't meant to be realistic. It's just silly, you know?
Yeah.
So it's fine.
Allison will give it a pass.
I suppose
just this
I'll
once.
allow it. I mean, Douglas Adams is dead, isn't he? So I can't really.
Yeah, you can't give him notes.
Yeah.
Would you? So do you think it actually is the best choice for this story? Or if this came across your desk, do you think that you would say, can you make these aliens more alien-like?
I don't think I would change it. I don't think I would bother suggesting changes. Like, just because that's not it's an absurd story. It doesn't like you could have fun. Like, he could have fun with really weird aliens if he wanted to. And I do think he has the creative brain to do that. Like, the things the absurd situations that he talks about are like, yeah, you could have a really weird alien, and I think it would be really fun. So I might be like, hey, you could do this if you wanted to. You don't need to.
He does have some really strange ones in there. Like, there's there's one that's just the color blue at the opening ceremony for the ship.
I like that one.
Right.
Then there's the green ones he was like, and they have 50 arms, and they're the only race ever to invent aerosol deodorant before the wheel, kind of thing.
Exactly. See, I don't even have to suggest it. He's already done exactly what I would have suggested. So there you go.
Yeah. I guess it's just the main cast are more humanoid, because that's easier.
And certainly easier for television at the time, for adaptations and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, that was even a problem, apparently, because I was reading about it before we started. So they have made a couple movies, and that was kind of a problem for Zaphod, because originally this was actually produced as a radio play, where, of course, it doesn't matter how many heads or arms your characters have. And then they made it into TV, and they're like, oh, now this guy has to have 2 heads and 3 arms, and we have to make this work.
I rewatched the movie with, like, Sam Rockwell and the movie, you know?
Is that the one with Martin Freeman?
I've never seen it.
Yes.
I avoid it.
And Zoe Deschanel.
Yeah, it's not.
It was
bad.
fine.
It's
It was
fine.
okay. If you want to see a really
That's-
good Douglas Adams adaptation, though, the Dirk Gently
Is it Dirk
TV
Gently?
show.
Yeah.
So
Oh
good.
That
yes,
one's great.
on Netflix. I also haven't watched that, but I've heard it's
It's
incredible.
so
and it's on my
good.
list
It's
to
good.
eventually.
But it also
get to.
has very little to do with the source material. It's really nothing like
Yeah.
the book.
Yeah.
So, but I really like it.
Along with aliens, we do get some looks into alien society a little bit, such as the president of the galaxy, which is also, I think, a little bit of that poking at political commentary,
Yes.
because, as is stated multiple times, the job of the president is not to wield power, but to distract away from it. So the actual political power of the galaxy does not lie with the president, but he is elected in order to draw headlines, essentially, which is very funny. Christiana, when I read that, I thought of you as somebody who's sort of in that world of political PR. How did that strike you?
It's deeply untrue, but that's what frightens me, actually, is
in
like,
our world, yeah.
I'm like, people are like, oh, they're just doing whatever. I'm like, no, you should be, look at what motions are being passed, because laws are actually happening in front of you right now.
Yeah. And then other kind of bits of alien society we do get mostly through those asides, like through the Hitchhiker's guide, that more or less relate to the plot, kind of depending on which aside it is. Did you ever feel like you wanted to get more of that? Like, were you left like, oh, I wish I knew more about how different alien societies worked? Or did you think that there was a good amount of that in the book?
I didn't want the asides to go longer because I think I would have been bored with too much. And I'm glad the book is short as well, because I don't think I would like it much if it was really long.
It would
I don't know.
require
It takes so much
a significant plot if it were to go any longer.
And it's just, there's so many asides, and it's so much about the humor that if it was like double the size, it would feel like I was plodding through it to get through the story, you know? I think all the choices Adams made were the right ones.
Yeah. And that's actually why one of the reasons that I think this book is really good to look at is because of that, because it does all of these things that shouldn't work, but because of the way they're done, they do, which I think is good to keep in mind, where it's like, if you make certain choices, you have to make other choices. Like, if you want to write a 500-page novel, you probably don't want it to be super quippy and humorous and, like, where that's the whole point, because that does, after a while, drag on. And then same thing if you want to write a political, epic, it can't be a novella that's 50 pages. Like, there's multiple choices that you have to make as an author.
Yeah.
Which I think not everybody thinks about. And because often when writing advice is given, it's sort of given to be one size fits all, because that's the easiest way to give advice. But if we've demonstrated anything on this show, it's that one size does not fit all. No. And there are some sort of general rules to follow, but they can kind of always be broken in the right circumstances.
I get annoyed with both ends of the spectrum. You'll have people who are like, don't listen to any advice, it's all nonsense, do whatever you want. And then you'll have people who say, you have to follow every rule by the letter. And I'm like, no to both of these things. The advice is often there for a reason, but it's helpful to understand what that reason is instead of just following it to the letter, because sometimes you can break the rules, in quotation marks. There aren't actually any rules. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
But if you want to be published, there are things you can do to help with that and make readers more engaged with your story. And all of those decisions that you're talking about, Emma, are a part of that.
Yeah. I think that's one of the really important things for, like, learning about craft or understanding craft when you're a writer is, like, why those rules are there or what they're trying to accomplish. Because then you can accomplish those things in different ways, right?
Yes.
If you understand why. And you can't really break a rule effectively until you know why and what it's trying to do. So it is also interesting because, like, you see a book like this that on its face, again, is very absurd, very ridiculous, and you think, oh, well, that must have been just like, you just dash that off and it's so easy to write. But actually, like, I think Douglas has an extreme understanding of craft and of how to, like, do things effectively, because you need to if you want to make something like this work.
Yeah, I'm curious, was this book popular when it was first published? Or is it one of those things where now that the author's dead, it's crazy popular?
No, I think it's been popular for, like, initially it was a radio play, and I think it did quite well in that format as well. I don't know whether it was a novel and a radio play at the same time, or if they did the radio play first and then it was novelized. But I think the story has always been quite popular.
That's neat.
So it connected with people even at the time. Another bit of world building is the spacecrafts. We don't get a ton of spacecrafts in this. We get a couple. We get the kind of Vogon destroyers, which is very funny to think about galactic sort of construction vehicles, because that's never what you see. It's always like these fancy spaceships flying. Although I guess when we did Becky Chambers' The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, they were technically on like a construction ship as well, because they were making wormholes.
It wasn't so directly compared to bulldozers.
Yes,
though.
yeah. It wasn't a literal sky bulldozer.
I love the improbability drive. I think it's hilarious and absurd and fits the story so well. And it's a great excuse to randomly get the crew out of tough spots that you're like, oh, they're about to be hit by missiles. What's going to happen? Just turn on the improbability drive. Those missiles will turn into a whale and some potted pansies or something.
A potted petunias,
yeah.
Which, spoiler alert, actually come back to be relevant in later books.
Do they? The whale's dead, though,
They
right?
do.
The whale doesn't come back.
The whale is dead, yeah. We get the very sad aside of the whale's brief consciousness of it coming to and then hitting the earth.
And then they land on it and, like, walk on the weird, gross whale blubber.
Yeah. There's some sentence about someone starts stomping around and then realizes that the whale carcass is not a good place to be stomping or something like that.
Poor whale.
Yeah, the improbability drive, actually, because we recently, of course, read Lucky Day by Chuck Tingle, which is all about like improbability and stats and stuff.
Yeah. But I feel like in both instances, it's the absurdism that makes it work. For Chuck Tingle, it's absurd in kind of a dark, gritty way. And then with this one, it's absurd in a funny way. And it's such a tongue-in-cheek way to build a ship that very conveniently gets them out of trouble just for funsies. If this wasn't a funny book, I feel like that would be the most frustrating thing in the world.
No, you couldn't do that if it wasn't
you can't do that in a serious sci-fi book. Like, and then you hit a button and it works. Like, people would lose their minds.
That would be really funny. That would be so annoying to read. It would just be like, great.
I mean,
that's one of the ways that like humor helps, because like humor is about hanging hats on things and stuff like that, which then works because you're putting a hat on that trope of like, and then at the last second they get saved. It's like, no, we've acknowledged that that's weird and unlikely. Allison, you were saying, sorry?
Oh, there's a term for that in regular fiction, Deus Ex Machina, and reasons why you probably don't want to do it, because it feels cheap.
Yes. Yeah. And even in this, I think if it was happening, every chapter, it would still get old. Like, it's, like, I think it's used twice in this book where it's something very unlikely. Which is kind of the right amount for it to be deployed without, And even the second time, it doesn't work right away, because they can't reach the button, because all of this stuff is happening with the missiles, and they're being thrown across the ship and stuff like that. So it's not an instant save. You're still a little bit like, oh, are they gonna reach it in time?
And then
although the omniscient narrator does tell us in advance that they get out of it just fine.
It's true. We do get it's okay, don't worry, they're gonna be fine from the narrator. Which is funny. So you're never really concerned about their lives.
Which again is very much like Princess Bride. There's a part in that novel where they do that as well. Don't worry, she doesn't get eaten at this time.
I can't decide how I feel about
I don't think that it undercut this. What, that they did the same thing?
No, the narrator warns that it effectively reduces tension by telling us what's going to happen, but it didn't really matter. Because I don't feel like it was all that tense to begin with, or that's not why I was reading. I guess that's not why I kept reading. It wasn't because I was afraid that something was going to happen to the characters. You're kind of just reading because it's entertaining.
It's entertaining, yeah. I was thinking about that too, because I was thinking about that from like sort of, when you're reading something for the podcast, you're approaching with a slightly different brain than if I'm just enjoying something. So I was thinking, like, oh, does this reduce the tension? Why does this work? And I don't think it did, because in this novel there's no expectation that characters are gonna die. Like, the tone of the novel is not, like a Game of Thrones. Anyone could die at any minute. So I'm already assuming that the characters are gonna get out fine. And so I think kind of highlighting that, like, almost takes, like, Because sometimes you're like, oh, of course the characters are going to get out fine. There's no tension. So then telling you they get out fine kind of removes that annoyance. And then also you're kind of in it more just to figure out how they do it. Like, what wacky hijinks are they going to do to get out of this? So in some ways it kind of heightens the stakes because you're like, oh, I know they get out of this, but like, in some wacky way. How is it going to happen?
I also think because the narrator is so funny, the narrator is a reliable narrator. Usually really funny voices like that aren't always reliable. I remember the first time I read it, I had a moment in my head where I was like, has he been an unreliable narrator the entire time?
So you wondered if he was telling you the truth or not.
Yes, I doubted it for a moment. The first time, I remember having that moment the first time I read it, thinking, wait, are we sure?
One of them's going to die.
Yeah. I guess we don't know if it's a he, she, they, whatever.
Yeah, I say he because I just listened to the audiobook on my reread, and it was Stephen Fry.
Yes.
Sorry.
Nice. Oh, that's fun.
Oh, that would also be a good reader.
He was very good. Yeah.
And it's also funny because in some ways, I mean, there is slight stakes because they tell us that somebody's upper arm gets bruised during the incident, but they don't tell us who it is, so as to preserve the stakes, which is very...
Whose arm gets bruised, though? I don't even remember. Whose was it?
I think it was Trillian's. I think she says, oh no, my arm hurts, or something afterwards, and you're just like, oh, mystery solved.
All right. Yeah.
So I think those are kind of the major parts of the world that I wanted to talk about. Was there anything else that struck you about the world specifically of Hitchhiker's Guide?
I liked the random asides that mice and dolphins are the true smart races of the Earth.
Yeah.
I'm trying to decide if I think Douglas Adams was a very cynical person or just a very laid-back, happy guy. Because I could see it either way, honestly.
Interesting.
This commentary he makes about humanity digging their own graves, kind of. You know, like we're just obsessed with money and capitalism and
digital watches.
And we're kind of stupid, and dolphins and mice are smarter than us. And I'm like, yeah, I see where you're coming from, Douglas Adams.
He strikes me as like an absurd nihilist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where it's like, nothing matters, but like in a fun way. You know?
I did see people talking about sort of some of the characters embodying different, like, Ford Prefect specifically is very nihilistic. Zaphod is very, like, solipsistic, which is, like, very, like, self-centered. So I do wonder if there was an intention to kind of make characters represent different perspectives on the world, to sort of contrast those.
That's interesting.
I'd have to look more into it to see what people who know more about philosophy think about it. But I was like, oh, that I could see that.
Trillian is pretty stoic in the sense of, like, well, what else am I going to do? Like, I'm a physicist, and this alien shows up. Like, I guess, guess I'll get on the ship. Like, very low reaction to things, which I find interesting.
And Arthur is your everyman who reacts how you would think someone should react. Yeah. Like, he's upset.
Screaming when terrifying things happen.
Although sometimes he is a lot more chill, but because Ford tells him that the Earth was destroyed, and he's like, well, I'm quite upset about that, or something like that.
He's very British.
Yeah, very
He's
British.
quintessentially British.
He needs his cup of tea.
Yeah. I did love, speaking again of like those really good descriptions of Arthur trying to come to terms with the Earth being destroyed, and the description is like, it was too big for him to comprehend the whole thing, so he had to keep getting smaller and be like, okay, what will actually hit me? He's like, there's no McDonald's. He's like, oh my goodness, that I can comprehend. But like the whole, and I feel like that's exactly how you react when something huge happens.
So
right?
much
it's like,
sense.
I have to like,
because at first he tries to think of America being gone. And he's like, nope, that's too big. I can't comprehend it. And he goes down smaller and smaller.
Yeah. He's like, New York is gone. He's like, well, he never really believed it existed in the first place. That doesn't really make much of a difference to him either.
But McDonald's, though. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that is comprehensible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, with that, let's head on over to Last Call. So, having talked a lot about this book and if it is a good example or not a good example, or is this, is following advice from this book going to ruin your writing career, what have we come up with that we can take away from the world building of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy to apply to our own worlds? Allison, do you want to kick us off? What did you learn from this book?
So I wrote this down ahead of time and I kind of already said it, but I'm going to reiterate. I like the use of the omniscient narrator for comedy and how Douglas Adams constantly throws all this philosophical commentary into his humor, and I think that's why the comedy works. And I wrote down a quote from the very first chapter or the intro. Most of the people living on Earth were unhappy for pretty much of the time. Many solutions were suggested for this problem, but most of these were largely concerned with the movements of small green pieces of paper, which is odd, because on the whole, it wasn't the small green pieces of paper that were unhappy. And this is just very common to the story, little asides like that about how people are obsessed with stupid things. And it works so well because the whole story starts with the world being destroyed. So it's like, oh, it's like putting that into perspective.
Yes.
Oh, okay, all these little things are really pointless in the grand scale of the universe, some of the things that we worry about.
Yes.
And yet they are still important. You know, Arthur still needs his cup of tea, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. No, that is, I do feel like this sort of perspective of what's important in the scale of the universe is kind of a theme that comes back. Like, that comes back in later books, too, of this idea. And it's just such an interesting premise of, like, what if the end of the world was banal and bureaucratic and not, like, cruel and a disaster?
Yeah, like, people, they're just gone. Like, they didn't really suffer. It's just poof. Yeah.
And then later, then that same quote is talking about to set the scene for what time period we're in. It's like 2,000 years after someone was nailed to a cross for suggesting, wouldn't it be great if we were all nice to each other for a change?
I also love that line. Yeah. So good.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. Christiana, what did you take away from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Or is yours a list of things not to do based on the book?
And see, I know I said it's a hot take. I do genuinely love the book, and I think everyone should read it. I just think it takes a very, very particular person to write a book like that. So it's just hard to hold it up as an example of, like, try this, because it's like,
I also feel like you need to be in the right mood.
This is kind of like, this is a miracle of achievement.
It is. Yeah, it's fantastic. But with that in mind, I think what I take away from this is that if you have two really big aspects of your book, make sure they mesh well together. For example, this book is very funny. If this book was also very politically intense, I don't think it would work. Because those are two things that are really big and require a lot of thought and, like, space in your head when you're consuming it, that I think it'd be butting up against each other and make it for a difficult read. If you're writing something and you want it to be super funny, I don't think you need a super intricate plot, because that will start getting mixed up in people's head. On the flip side, if you have a super intricate plot, I don't think you need your book to be super voicey with it, right? I think it's about balancing which elements you really want to shine.
Because I want to bring up Dungeon Crawler Carl, which is a book we talked about in a previous season, because it is very funny and kind of absurd, but it also gets quite serious with the social commentary and all the getting into the politics.
Yes.
And deep stuff.
But the politics are straightforward.
That's
like,
what I mean. Like, I'm thinking like Game of Thrones, where it's like
factions.
You almost need a map on your wall. That's what I mean.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
I mean, like, if it's something that you have to really keep track of in your head, also having a really funny voice on top of that, I feel like will mess people up a little bit, kind of thing. So that's just my opinion, though.
Yeah, it can be helpful when it's like there's one bad guy, like the Empire, and it's like, okay, we know what the, like, who the political baddies are, as opposed to, like, there's 8 different morally gray factions. And
people are backstabbing each other, and
how that could get tricky.
Yeah, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think I hear you.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. I have a bit of advice, but first, so I'm going to almost do 2. So my first one is this is where I'm going to make a case for craft, because I think there is a lot of times a discussion of, like, is writing well important? Does it matter if a book is written well? Isn't it just about enjoying the story? And that can totally be true, and I think you don't always have to read for, like, craft reasons. As an editor and a writer, I'm very passionate about craft, so I am biased, but I do think that, like, the craft of writing and storytelling can be important, and I think it's for reasons like this. Yeah. Like, you can't pull off a story like this if you don't care about the craft, if you don't care about line level writing, if you don't care about what makes books compelling, what makes stories compelling, how people think, that sort of thing. So I just make a case for craft of, yes, sometimes it can seem frustrating to be told that there's all these rules you have to follow, or why do I need to care about these things? I just want to tell a story. But craft isn't just something that's arbitrarily elitist. It is actually something that makes for good stories and good novels. Like, and
I always try and explain it to people, like, with some stories, like, not having that perfect craft isn't going to, like, ruin the story, but having it will always make it better. Sometimes stories don't necessarily need it, but it will bump it up a level every time.
Yeah. So there's my little case for craft. Then also something more specific from this is a great example of characters being part of the world building. Like Zaphod and Ford and even Arthur, they're all very much products of their environment, as we all are. And so I think when you're doing world building, your world needs to shape your characters. Like if you look just at a character, you should be able to say something about the world that they come from. Like, if you look just at Arthur, you can tell he's very normal. He's come from a very normal world. You look at Zaphod, he does not come from a normal world. He's very British. Zaphod does not come from a very normal world. So I think if you just look at your characters and you can't tell anything about the world that they are from, then you maybe have a little bit more work to do in sort of integrating those two things. Because they shouldn't be separate. They should be, meshed together. So I think this is a great book to look at for examples of that. And now it's time for our favorite segment, Proprietor's Peak! Yay! This is where we're going to talk about what we're talking about next time.
Wait, this is our favorite segment for what we're talking about next time?
We only care about the future. The past is no longer important.
I see how it is.
Next episode, which of course will be our best episode, will be better than this one. They just keep getting better and better. Next episode is going to be a world building workshop. I am going to be guiding us through building a spacecraft. So that should be very exciting. I think that'll be fun. And our next tavern episode is going to be in May 2026, if you are listening as this drops. And we are going to be discussing Skin of the Sea by Natasha Bowen. This is Christiana's pick. Christiana, do you want to give us a brief pitch as to the
why did you pick this book?
Yes.
Why you chose it?
So I haven't read this one. I'll say that up front, but I am
a mystery.
Deeply intrigued by the description of it. So, Simi prayed to the gods once. Now she serves them as Mamiwata. I think I might be saying that wrong. A mermaid, collecting the souls of those who die at sea and blessing their journeys back home. But when a living boy is thrown overboard, Simi goes against an ancient decree and does the unthinkable. She saves his life, and punishment awaits those who dare to defy the gods. Which, there's a bit more, but I love
super cool.
Dark fantasy stories at all in general, and I feel like I have never read one about mermaids, which the concept of mermaids is actually pretty freaky.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited to see that.
Oh, I hope it's good. So tune in May, or 2 episodes from now, if you're listening in the far future and these are all released, to hear us talk about Skin of the Sea. If you have not read this book, you can get it from our bookshop.org page. The links are in the show notes, which will support both the podcast and an indie bookstore.
Yay!
Unfortunately, this does bring us to closing time. We would love to stay longer, but these incredibly improbable events are not going to happen if we don't push all of these buttons. You can support the podcast by joining our Patreon, where you can access bonus world-building workshop episodes from seasons past. A free way to show us love is by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcatcher of choice. It really helps us out to spread the word and get more listeners. You can find us online on our Discord, where we chat about books, writing, and world-building, on TikTok, and at our website, www.worldbuilderstavern.com. We hope to serve you here again soon, but until next time, scram!
Bye!
Get out of here!